Apologize for the delay on everything. This is the nature of what's going on right now, back and forth. And we'll have some members that will be coming in and out. The important thing is that the testimony that you're going to be giving will be in the congressional record. And so even for members that are coming in and out, we'll be able to reference that in time to come. So I really appreciate y'all being here. Let me gavel us back in. Subcommittee will come back into order. We're going to welcome our panel of guests. Very honored that y'all chose to be able to be here today and to be able to share your testimony with us, both oral and written testimony. Ms. Mary Kendall is now the Acting Inspector General at the Department of Interior. Thank you very much for being here. Ms. Anu Mittal is the Director of Natural Resources and Environment Team at GAO. Ms. Patricia Duville is the Council Representative for the Rosebud Sioux Tribe. Mr. Ron Allen is the Chairman of the Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe. So we really appreciate you all being here. It is our tradition that we swear in witnesses before we begin testimony. If you would please stand and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give to this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record reflect the witnesses answered in the affirmative. You may be seated. In order to allow time for discussion, I'd ask you to be able to limit your oral testimony to around 5 minutes. There are little lights that you'll see in front of you there that will help count everything down for you. Your entire written statement may be made part of the record in case you don't get all of your oral testimony in. I'd like to begin with you, Ms. Kendall, and you may begin your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify today about the challenges associated with economic development on tribal lands and the creation of jobs for American Indians. Responsibility to American Indians has consistently been a top management challenge for the Department of the Interior. The myriad problems we have uncovered in BIA portray programs that are sorely understaffed and poorly managed. The OIG has identified gross program inefficiencies at many levels at Indian Affairs and in tribal land management of Federal funds. Let me summarize some of the more recent work we have done regarding the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The Federal Government has long acknowledged the complexity of land fractionation on Indian trust operations. Fractionation is the result of dividing tribal land into parcels and allotting the parcels to individual Indians. The allotments are then subsequently divided among heirs through probate. With each generation, the amount of fractionation increases. We are working with the Department as it develops a comprehensive plan that will guide its efforts to significantly reduce fractionation. We found that $32 million in roads funds were distributed by one region annually, but only $3 to $4 million in roads projects had any physical oversight or verification of work by BIA. In another instance, we determined that BIA paid out over $2.4 million for airport and roads improvement. Of that, we estimate that $1.6 million had been expended on a non-specified road maintenance project, and that as much as $200,000 may have been overbilled by a subcontractor. BIA also mismanaged a $9 million DOT-funded ferry boat in Alaska that turned into a private boat tour. In each of these instances, meaningful management oversight was, quite simply, absent. Nearly 7 years ago, the OIG conducted a thorough assessment of Indian country detention facilities. Our assessment revealed a long history of neglect and apathy on the part of BIA officials, which resulted in serious safety, security, and maintenance deficiencies at the majority of the detention facilities in Indian country. We recently completed an evaluation of BIA's efforts to improve staffing levels at their detention facilities, a critical issue directly impacting safety and security, and a key recommendation from our 2004 report. We have determined that despite the focus of the seriousness of the problem and a 48% increase in funding, in excess of $64 million, BIA has failed to address the staffing shortages, and the state of these facilities remains largely unchanged. In February 2010, the OIG issued an evaluation of school violence prevention measures in tribally operated schools. Overall, our evaluation revealed that many schools are dangerously unprepared to prevent violence and ensure the safety of students and staff. That report on school violence was preceded by a report in August 2008 addressing preparedness for violence in BIE-operated schools. Our findings were, not surprisingly, very similar. In some other management weaknesses, 10 individuals, including a BIA agency superintendent, have been indicted in connection with a decade-long fraud scheme to embezzle funds from a tribal credit program. 7 of the 10 indicted, including 2 other BIA employees, have pleaded guilty to various charges related to the fraud scheme. Total loss to the credit program is approximately $1.2 million. For 14 years, BIA funded a non-existent fish hatchery. BIA continued to fund the hatchery even after a superintendent visited the reservation and saw that the hatchery site had been converted into office space. Due to our resource limitations, the OIG refers many serious allegations of employee misconduct, such as fraud, theft, retaliation, and misuse of funds, to the BIA on a regular basis, with the expectation that the issues will be appropriately resolved or that poor managers and/or ethically challenged employees will be held accountable. Unfortunately, BIA, more than any other bureau at Interior, has a history of failing to respond to the OIG referrals, or even worse, completely disregarding the serious matters referred to them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to share this information with you. I will be happy to answer any questions you or other members of the committee may have.
Thank you very much. Director Mattal.
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I am pleased to be here today to participate in your hearing on challenges to economic development in Indian country. As you know, Indian tribes are among the nation's most economically distressed groups and often lack basic infrastructure. Without such infrastructure, tribes often find it difficult to compete successfully in the economic mainstream. In addition, our past work has identified several unique circumstances that exist in Indian country that may create additional uncertainties or impediments for both tribes and private companies wishing to pursue economic activity in these areas. I would like to briefly describe 5 of these unique circumstances for you. The first unique circumstance that creates uncertainty relates to the land in trust status for Indian lands. In 1934, the Indian Reorganization Act provided the Secretary of the Interior discretionary authority to take land in trust on behalf of federally recognized tribes or their members. Trust status helps secure these lands for tribal use, and these lands are no longer subject to state and local property taxes and zoning ordinances. However, a 2009 Supreme Court decision has created significant uncertainty regarding the land in trust status for a large number of tribes. This is because the Supreme Court ruled that Interior can only take land in trust for tribes that were under federal jurisdiction in 1934. At this time, it is unclear how many pending land in trust applications will be affected by this decision. The second circumstance unique to Indian country relates to tribal environmental standards. The Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, and Clean Air Act authorize EPA to treat Indian tribes as states for the purposes of implementing these laws on tribal lands. As sovereign governments, tribes want to exercise this authority because they believe they are more familiar with their own environmental needs. However, states are concerned that allowing tribes to set these standards could result in a patchwork of standards within the state and potentially hinder a state's overall economic development plans. Our past work has indeed found that this authority has resulted in several disagreements between tribes and states. In addition, more stringent tribal standards could also act as a disincentive for companies who may choose to not operate their businesses on tribal lands because of these standards. The third circumstance relates to the use of special tax provisions for Indian reservations. One example of such a special tax provision is allowing tribes to use tax-exempt bonds to finance essential government functions on reservations. Use of tax-exempt bonds lowers borrowing costs for tribes and provides higher after-tax yields to investors. However, it is unclear to what extent this provision has actually helped tribes because the IRS has not yet issued regulations defining what activities are allowable under this provision. Without these regulations, tribes have limited guidance to help them decide what functions they can fund with tax-exempt bonds. The fourth circumstance relates to the complex process of obtaining rights-of-way across Indian lands. Securing rights-of-way is an essential step to providing tribes with the critical infrastructure that they need to support economic activity. However, obtaining rights-of-way can be time-consuming and expensive, in part because Interior must approve these applications. Several of the steps that service providers must take to get Interior's approval involve negotiating with the landowners, who can be individuals, multiple owners, or tribes. If an individual allotment of Indian land is owned by multiple owners, sometimes reaching into the hundreds, then this process can become even more onerous because federal regulations require that the majority of owners must approve a right-of-way before it can be finalized. The final unique circumstance I would like to discuss is the legal and judicial systems that exist in Indian country. Having effective legal and judicial systems is often considered a prerequisite to attracting private investment to tribal lands. This is because such systems provide investors with assurance that disputes will be resolved fairly. However, the legal and judicial systems on tribal lands are fairly complex, and tribes also have sovereign immunity. These circumstances can act as disincentives for businesses who are trying to decide whether to operate on tribal or non-tribal lands. As you can see, Mr. Chairman, there are a number of unique circumstances that tribes and business owners must consider when making decisions about whether or not to pursue economic development in Indian country. In some cases, these circumstances can act as impediments. This concludes my prepared statement. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We look forward to that conversation. Thank you, Director. Mrs. Duville, we'd be honored to take your testimony now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. On behalf of the President Rodney Bordeaux of the Rosebud Sioux Tribe of Sicangu-Alate, I would like to thank you for convening this hearing on regulatory barriers in American Indian job creation. The Rosebud Sioux Indian Reservation is located in south-central South Dakota. Our reservation consists of 900,000 plus acres of rolling prairie grasslands rich for agricultural production and filled with other natural resources. Our tribal president, Rodney Bordeaux, has now presided for 6 years. The weight of his position bears heavily upon his heart. He has seen entirely too much poverty and tragedy on a daily basis among our people. This underlying poverty has caused many social ills and issues. Now it has become so pronounced that an air of hopelessness exists on the reservation, especially within our youth. According to the 2010 census, the Rosebud Reservation lies in the 4th poorest county in our nation. With your help, we intend to change this. Our natural resources here are many. We intend to use these resources to the best of our abilities, from grazing cattle to farming leases, along with timber production. In the future, we seek to build our economy from the renewable energies that our resources provide, from wind development, hydropower, geothermal, to biomass and to fuels. The Rosebud Sioux Tribe has been exploring the potential of wind power since 1998, and in March of 2003, we built a 750 kilowatt neg-micron turbine capable of providing enough electricity for 200 homes annually. We call this project the Casino Turbine Project, because it's located next to our tribal casino. This effort was accomplished through the assistance of the Department of Energy grant and a rural utility service loan through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. From this initial project, the Rosebud Sioux Tribe accomplished the goal of having the first commercial sale of wind energy by the tribal government in the United States, and we are very proud to state that. Our partners in the accomplishment were Distributed General Incorporated of Lakewood, California, DISGEN, and Intertribal Council on Utility Policy, ICU. After our first project, we continued our partnership with DISGEN. And with their assistance, we applied for and were awarded a second DOE grant in 2003 to conduct all the pre-construction activity to develop a 300-megawatt wind farm near the town of St. Francis, South Dakota, on tribal lands, trust lands, called the Owl Feather Warbonnet Wind Farm. In 2008, 5 long years since the award, a FONSI was issued by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and a grant use and lease agreement with DISGEN and OFWB LLC was also provided by the BIA and the tribe. Despite insurmountable hurdles and delayed action from BIA, we have a shovel-ready wind farm project since August 2008. The remaining issue to overcome is a power purchase agreement, PPA, and this issue has severely tested the expertise of our developer, Dale Osborne of DISGEN, due to the uniqueness of the project being on tribal trust lands and the distance to electric load. Time is an important issue in this matter, and the project needs to be ready when an RFE is posted. If the BIA did not take 18 months to approve the grant and lease agreement, the project could have been operating and making a sorely needed revenue stream for the tribe. We had 2 draft PPAs in hand, but due to the lack of wind experience within the BIA and the BIA extensive timeframes, the RFPs for renewable energies from Basin Electric and then Nebraska Public Power District has expired. DISGEN's efforts to make this project succeed were undeniable, and they have, in my view, exhausted all efforts to work with MPPC and Southwest Power Pool to respond to all RFPs applicable. Unless we sell directly to NPPD, the project cannot get built. Selling beyond NPPD, wielding and tariff tax will drive the economics beyond the cost to build and repair the project, plus royalties. It is estimated that we can build this project at $66 million if the project can ensure a PPA on 4.5 cents a kilowatt, escalating at 2.5% annually, with no wheeling or tariff fees imposed, and only if we sell to NPPD. A power purchase agreement is the only remaining significant issue that needs to be completed for OFWB. It has identified 3 federal energy buyers that may apply for double RECs, point toward the renewable energy goals of the Energy Policy Act of 2005. First one is any federal agency through the WAPA system that could take the energy from the St. Francis substation to Omaha Public Power District and can sell the energy and renewable energy certificates to Offutt Air Force Base. An NPPD that could sell the energy and RECs to the federal customers. This project can be constructed by the end of 2011. The federal government can make this project happen if trust responsibility is exercised in good faith. We are not asking for monies to fund this project. We're asking the federal government to assist us in the efforts to secure a PPD. Help us find this path. We also ask that you live up to the doctrine of trust responsibility in assisting us to help ourselves in building our economy. Direct the Department of Energy to assist the Bureau of Indian Affairs to fine-tune and quicken the process of all economic development ventures on federal Indian trust lands. The current process is too time-consuming and bureaucratic, most often killing any project immediately, as most investors don't want a project to be collecting dust on BIA's shelf. This will eliminate an over-bureaucratic process to develop renewable energies on the Rosebud Sioux Tribe. Intends to utilize the revenue from our from revenue streams from our commercial wind efforts to teach energy education, energy efficiency, and energy independence. The use of our natural resources will help our people and the tribes to build self-sustainable businesses from the renewable energy sources. The revenue brought forth will address our people's drastic need to upgrade our existing houses into energy-efficient homes with renewable energy devices attached, to lessen our dependency on the larger electrical grid, along with the employment and businesses for our people. Thank you for your time. I wasn't able to read the whole testimony because it is quite lengthy, as you can tell, and I was only speaking on one issue, but there are so many more that we have.
Well, we will have several questions for you, and we'll be honored to be able to have that testimony and put it into the written record as well.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Chairman Allen, honored that you're here. Be pleased to receive 5 minutes testimony from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have my testimony, and thank you for accepting it and putting it in the record. Again, I'm Ron Allen, Chairman of Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe, located in western Washington State. I'm also the treasurer for the National Congress of American Indians, and I have served in that organization for about 20 years. I've been the chairman for 34 years, and so I've been actively involved in Indian country from east to west, north to south. I probably have been on more Indian reservations than anybody, except maybe Senator Dan Inouye. This topic of regulatory barriers for economic development and job creation in Indian country is a very broad category. In our testimony, we share with you the success of my tribe. 565 Indian nations in America, and we're from small, like my tribe, to larger ones like the Rosebud Sioux. And we all have various different circumstances in which that we want to advance our economic development and our independence. And the independent nature of the Indian communities is a long-standing historical relationship. The mere fact that there's become a dependency is not our fault. It's a fault of a system, that it's a historical system. So the question of the regulatory barriers is relative to what is the Federal Government's obligation and responsibilities via treaties and statutes and just moral, legal responsibilities to the Indian communities as governments in our political system. We think it's deeply rooted and curved back into the Constitution. But we also feel that we have made great success as the United States government has made a decision. Termination, assimilation are policies that don't work. Empowerment of tribal governments in our communities and our people in order to advance economic development does work. And you have seen in the last 25+ years where it is becoming more and more successful. You have heard in previous testimonies different examples and different areas where it needs to work. Fraud and abuse issues that are out there, yes. But in relative to how the success is, it's a small area. So we don't want you to see a few small areas where we've gone awry and judge how well we're doing categorically across America. Success is going exceptionally well in economic development, but we do have barriers. The GAO has made the point of examples of access to finance. The Tribal Government Tax Status Act, passed in 1984, created the authority of us to issue tax-exempt bonds to seek revenues in order to advance economic development in our community. But it does not treat us the same as governments. If you had cities coming in and they're telling you we're not treated the same way as the states, you would create a fair playing ground for them. So access to economic development, access to resources and finances is very important to our communities. The other comment that was made that you need to understand is are the bureaucracies impediments to us getting economic development, or to our governments have stronger capacities? Well, the issue is, do they have the resources? So if you look at our political structure as governments, do we have the legal political infrastructure that is conducive to the private sector coming onto the Indian reservations and conducting business? So do they have recourse, or do they have an incentive to come on, tax benefits and things along that nature? Whether it's energy, or whether it's creating widgets, or whether it's advancing different resources that you have, timber, or like in my area, fisheries industries. What is their incentive to come into our reservations and do business? My tribe shows you that we can be successful. There are other tribes that are doing the same thing. So we don't want you to be skewed by the gaming industry that has been quite successful for some of the tribes. You know, out of the 565, 230 or 240 of them are in the gaming industry. Of that 230 or 40, it's really, you know, a couple of, a triple dozen that actually are the really successful ones you hear about. Not the majority of them that are more break even though they've created jobs. But what it has done that you need to understand is that it's created a new kind of resource that made available to the tribal governments that they now can invest into their communities and diversify their economic development portfolio and do things that the federal government can't do. So you see areas where tribes are becoming more resourceful, more independent. Self-governance, a legislation that is very effective in us negotiating for our fair share of a federal system and let us manage it. So if you ask yourself how much would it cost us to help you become more independent, you don't have enough money. You don't even have enough money to deal with America's problems today. We can't count on you to live up to those treaty commitments. But if you empower us, if you help us, become stronger as governments, we can get the job done, and we can show you countless examples where it's working. So I'm just touching on a few of the issues, Mr. Chairman. This topic is a broad issue. There are people out there in the federal system who are trying, and they have their own constraints, and there are regulatory impediments, no question about that, that should be removed. But the issue is, can you count on us becoming a part of the health and the economic fiber of America? Yes, when for the most part we're in rural America, and rural America is an equal part of the fiber of this nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your testimony on that. Let me run through just a few questions that I'll have briefly to get some more context on it. Chairman Allen, are you on a reservation tribe or non-reservation tribe?
I'm a reservation tribe. I'm a small reservation. We own about 1,000 acres, and of that 1,000 acres, we only have about 35 that's actually in reservation status.
Okay. So you have 1,000 acres there, 35 you're saying is in trust, is in reservation status, is that what you're saying?
Yes, and we have a lot of land that's in the process. It was noted earlier about the land in the trust process that has been an impediment because of the Carcieri Supreme Court decision. Once that is removed, then it opens up that opportunity for that trust status, and many of us will reacquire it, whether it's a checkerboard reservation or whether it's a small reservation like ours that are trying to strengthen our homeland base.
Okay. You mentioned, Chairman Allen, about empowerment's better than forced assimilation. Can you give me a specific example of what you would say, this is empowerment, what would be helpful?
Relative to the assimilation policy?
Well, no. Just you're saying empowerment's better than forced assimilation by far. So what I was looking for is a specific example of what you mean when you say empowerment. Empower us in this.
Probably the one that comes quick to mind is as a government, if the government, even though we have individuals we're trying to enhance with regard to their business, as governments, we have no economic base. So we have no revenue base. So our revenue base is based on the businesses that we generate. So if we're going to become independent from the federal government and become less dependent on it, then that base has to be the foundation for these unrestricted resources to deal with the unmet needs in our community. Okay. And so the issue for us will be the government has to have the authority that resource is tax exempt. The rules, the laws that recognize that unique stature of the tribal corporations and the revenue generated by it, and the IRS recognition of that authority is a big deal to us, and as well as the authority, the unencumbered authority to secure tax-exempt loans, for economic development.
Great, thank you. Ms. Kendall, can I ask you a question about fractionalization? I know that came up earlier on it. Is there a list that's available to the tribes of the land that's currently going through? Obviously, people are being contacted now based on what just occurred last year in the purchase of lands, and people are being contacted to see if they want to be able to combine that out, correct?
Is your question, are people being contacted?
Well, yes, that's going on currently. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. The question that I have with that is, are the tribes made aware, because that land, if it is purchased back, then it is ceded to the tribe. Is that correct, as trust land?
That's my understanding.
Will the tribes be aware that this land is in process? Is there any system that you know of that's in place out there so that the tribes know, here's the land that's going through the process, and there are 10 that are still interested, and there are 20 that are not in the purchase process.
What my understanding is that the Department has presently a program that addresses fractionation. It's been a very small program up until the promise that the Cobell settlement has. The Department, for a number of reasons, had not put in a plan in place until the approval goes through. They're thinking about it, they're talking internally, but they have not done the kind of proactive communication, I guess, because they don't want to sort of preempt the finalization of the settlement.
Okay, thank you. It'll be a question that we'll try to ask them directly on that and be able to track down that. Director Mattel, a question for you on just dealing with the dynamics of all of these issues that you raised, and you raised some terrific issues on it, on how do we get involved with this. Some of those boil down to BIA really has a responsibility to help businesses know how to navigate through Indian law and dealing with their court systems and the unique dynamics of that, so businesses will not feel prohibited to be there. They'll be encouraged to be there, and there's someone can help them navigate through that. Do you see anywhere out there a process that's in place from BIA to say, we're going to help any business, whether it is a McDonald's or whether it is a company that builds widgets, as Chairman Allen mentioned before, that wants to be able to come here so that someone will help them through that process? Does that kind of program exist?
I am not aware of such a program, such a comprehensive program. There might be individual programs for specific parts of within BIA, for example, to help them through navigate the judicial system and things like that. But I'm not aware of a comprehensive program like you just described.
Okay, Ms. Kendall, you're aware of any type of program like that that would help outside businesses that want to be able to invest in tribes know how to be able to navigate the process?
I am not, sir.
Okay. Well, that is one we'll try to be able to follow up on that one as well. Director Mattel, you had also mentioned the patchwork of environmental standards, and just talking about that. Can you talk about just the relationship, the states, the state, the tribe, and the federal all trying to work together? Has that become an issue for businesses being able to come in, and what are the solutions that are being formed on that? Who's finding a way to solve that, I guess I should say, or a success story?
We haven't actually looked at the relationship standards and businesses. What our past work has looked at is that the conflict that creates between the tribal governments and the states. So those are the issues that we have seen, that in the past, that because the tribes have this authority under the 3 acts, they have created conflicts with the states. For example, states don't like the fact that the tribes are setting standards that are more stringent than the state standards. So that's the area that we have focused on. We haven't done any extensive work looking at the effect that's had on businesses.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I am out of time. I'm going to be able to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Connolly, for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But I see we've been joined by our full committee chairman, and I would be happy to yield to him, reclaiming my time when he is finished.
Well, that's very generous. The ranking member knows that I generally, I'm afraid, ask questions and then move to another subcommittee. So very wise of you, Jerry. But thank you. I'll be brief. I've got just a couple of questions, and they're sort of between the 2 government entities here. Ms. Kendall, you produce IG reports and conduct audits and investigations, report your finding to the BIA. Is BIA responsive to the information you're sending them?
Not always. We do get responses primarily on the audit side. We request responses from investigations that we provide to them.
Why do you think they don't respond with some predictability?
I wish I knew the answer, Mr. Chairman. I simply don't. One of the feelings we get in the Office of Inspector General is they're simply outweighting us.
You know, one of the things we like here is that it's harder to outweigh us. So it's an area where we do want to ask you to submit a good subsegment of ones that you feel that you need a response for, haven't gotten a response, or at least it would be helpful, and let us know about them, because we probably in most cases want to know as badly as you do, and we'll be able to ask independently. And quite honestly, those will help educate us. Chairman, the question that was actually more directed toward our U.S. government representatives, but I'd ask you, do you think there's any way that your tribe could navigate through business attempts with the current BIA support, meaning if you didn't hire your own lawyers at whatever expense you have to pay for specialists that understand the tribal process with BIA, do you think there's any chance that you could do it without that expense?
Yes.
Do you do it?
And we are doing it.
Including land and trust applications?
Well, no, the land and the trust is a federal function that we can't do. There are components of that process that we could do if they would accept it, including the environmental review process. And we do a lot of that for them. So that's where a lot of the federal functions can be taken over by us that aren't essential federal functions. That would make the process move much smoother, much faster.
Well, let me do one follow-up question, and for either of the tribal members. I've worked on land and trust for a number of the tribes in my district and around the area, and it's even when, for example, BLM is begging the tribe to take land that they don't have the funds to maintain, that are not developable, but they have ancestral significance, we go through a long, multi-year process to get it in trust. And so even when it's in the Federal Government's best interest to deliver it, even when the tribe is willing to pay for the future maintenance, et cetera, because I have some well-to-do tribes, you can't get the process quickly. In concert with the Natural Resources Committee, obviously the Committee of Primary Jurisdiction, and I would ask this to all of you, do believe that what we should be doing is to come up with greater master plans of the aspirations of tribes, commit land in trust designations, so that if fee land is acquired at any time, it has already gone through the process in a master plan, the same way as a city often doesn't have all of its territory filled out, but it will stake the claim to that. And I'd take it from both sides if you could, because it's an area that I've never been able to move along, but that I think would be part of that changing of it, if you could literally clear those areas of aspiration so that then when they become available through fee or other purposes, you could acquire them. Please, Chairman.
Well, first of all, the answer is yes to that most tribes have a comprehensive land use plan that usually includes their existing reservation and their ceded territory where they resided. And it can be a little complicated because in many of our communities it overlaps into our sister tribes. So we have to be respectful of that our comprehensive land plan, of which that we want to acquire lands for multiple reasons, economic development, cultural reasons, natural resource, et cetera, that may overlap. So some areas very clearly is in our territory of the tribe, but some will overlap into other territories that our sister tribe will have an interest in, and we have to resolve those issues. But there are some issues within the process that we have to be careful. The United States government does not want to take land into trust if there is any liability. I mean any liability. It will not take any land in trust. So we have to go through it, and that's why sometimes the process will take a long time. There may be something identified environmentally or so forth that the United States government says, we got a problem. Until we get that resolved so that I have absolutely no liability, this land will not be taken into trust. That has been the biggest hiccup, in the process. Set aside the Carcieri problem that we currently are emerging. But now many tribes do not have that comprehensive plan in place, and they should be encouraged to do that because their ceded territory is often much greater than their reservation base.
And my time has expired. I'll just, if you could, in the case of California, where they lost all of their ancestral tribes, they were part of the mission system in most cases, and even if they got it, there were often checkerboards where these fell out during the allotment period. That's the area that we've dealt with a lot, where when you buy a piece that's within your contiguous border, you still have to go through an extensive and expensive process to get it in trust. Any other comments? Because my time has expired. But if there's anything else that the committee should know about expediting that process in order to allow for particularly beneficial use. Mr. Connolly, I'm in your debt. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And with the permission of the Chair, I will
Absolutely.
proceed.
Thank you for your courtesy on that.
Absolutely. And while the Chairman is still here, I would like to follow up on his question to you, Ms. Kendall. I'm not sure I understood your answer. You responded to the Chairman, Chairman Issa, when he said, are you getting cooperation from BIA? You seemed to suggest no, and you seemed to suggest the reason you were given or the reason you understood that lack of cooperation was they were waiting you out. A, what kind of cooperation are you getting or not getting? How have you communicated to them that that won't be acceptable? And waiting you out meaning what? That you're the acting Inspector General and maybe when they get somebody else, he or she will be friendlier?
No, not at all, sir. This has been a long-standing problem with BIA, and much of it has to do not necessarily with our audits or investigations, but we refer a lot of allegations that we receive back to bureaus, and we do that with BIA as well. We probably receive almost 50% of the allegations we receive relate to BIA. And so
For the whole Department of the Interior?
Yes. And so a good portion we will not investigate ourselves or conduct an audit ourselves.
Could I just interrupt you one more time just to make sure we all understand what you're saying? 50% of the allegations implies fraud or a crime.
Allegations of wrongdoing,
Yeah.
one way or the other, yes. So I can say affirmatively that in the matters that we refer to them to respond to themselves, they have been very lacking in getting back to us and being responsive. And in fact, we have just, really in a sense of frustration, have decided that we will close these matters out as non-responsive and start reporting them to Congress in our semi-annual report.
Thank you. And you are the only IG with jurisdiction over the BIA?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Chairman Allen and Ms. Duville, please feel free to comment as well if you wish. I just want to sort of tick off some of the items that were cut or eliminated in H.R. 1, the continuing resolution passed on a party line vote here in the House. $581.3 million reduction for state and local law enforcement assistance account, which tribal courts and tribal detention facilities receive funding from. $17.9 million reduction to Office of Special Trustee for American Indians. $9 million decrease to the BIA construction account. $900,000 reduction to the Indian Land and Water Claims Settlement and Miscellaneous Payments account. Reductions proposed for labor, education, health, and human services serving American Indians, Alaska Natives, including Head Start, tribal colleges, Native American serving non-tribal institutions, tribally controlled post-secondary vocational institutions, and the list goes on. A decrease of $139.3 million to the IHS facilities account, which also affects tribal lands, and $200 million in reductions to the Native American Housing Block Grant Program. Would those reductions have any impact at all on the quality of life and reservations of tribal lands?
Well, yes, absolutely. You know, there is no community in America that's more underserved than American Indian communities. I mean, all you have to do is look at the fact that our average unemployment rate in the Indian country is in the mid-30s. Just the average. You go to Rosebud and you go to Pine Ridge and some of these other communities where it's in the 70s and 80s. It's ridiculous. The fact that these Head Start programs or these school construction programs or roads programs or the reduction of loan guarantee programs, all in disincentives, you know, to invest in our Indian communities, that we don't have the physical infrastructure to take care of our community needs. So it's not just about economic development. It's the community infrastructure to be able to take care of our families and our kids and to educate them and to enhance their abilities to care for their needs. Public safety. You want to talk about public safety issues? You must know about the atrocities going on in our communities. The violence against Indian women and our families and our kids is it's terrible. It's just sad commentary of what's going on in our society. So we know that the Congress is wrestling over the deficit reduction. But we can tell you, when you look at this $3 trillion budget relative to where we are, the Indian communities, the resources, the limited resources, is a drop in the bucket. And we know that they're shaving them everywhere they can. But I'm telling you that it's going to have a serious detrimental impact to what marginal success that we've been achieving in the last couple of years. It's been stagnant. If you look at the budgets, you look at the way we've been moving forward, and the most significant increases are in health care. But even in the significant increases in health care, you can see the fact that we're still way behind when you measure every health care category that you'd measure the health status of our communities and our people, from the kids to the elders. And so it's a struggle for us. And we see those kind of programs, HUD programs, go after a whole bunch of programs, community programs and economic development programs, natural resource enhancement programs, et cetera, that are out there. Each one of those programs all make a difference in our communities. And we're pushing to become stronger, more vibrant. And they all contribute. They all interface. They're interrelated. And so the answer is yes. It's a detriment. It's a setback. It's disappointing. Because we think we're getting traction with Congress. We think Congress is listening to us that, okay, we got some problems, we got some needs. In appropriations, the chairman saying, we got a problem here, we're underserving Indian communities. And so we're going to hold the line. We're going, yes, hold the line, but we're missing some serious needs here, whether it's Interior or HUD or DOL or Labor or Commerce. Each one of them have a role in enhancing the welfare of our governments and our communities.
Thank you.
Yes. All these cuts in H.R. 1, they're highly devastating to our tribes, especially to mine. Historically, we have never been funded at 100%. And that is the government trust responsibility to us. Cutting the housing, the IHS, we have programs that need this money. We have children that depend on a lot of this. And that is our future. That's what we consider sacred, is our children. And cuts like this make it so hard, make it even harder for us. And the hopelessness that I've talked about earlier, it just pronounces it more. So with these cuts, if the government would live up to their trust responsibility, give us the 100% that we need and we're asking for, then we won't be a burden. And that would empower us to be just as equal as any other nation within our nation. So, yeah, this will hurt us, and it is going to hurt us. But we're strong. We'll survive. We survived for hundreds of thousands of years. But with your help, our quality of life would be better.
Ms. Kendall, earlier you were talking about some of the issues of waste. Sorry, I was referencing Mr. Labrador. I apologize for that. Mr. Labrador.
You're fine, Mr. Chairman. I actually yield the time to you.
Thank you. Ms. Kendall, you referenced earlier several issues that were coming up where funding had been allotted. As I recall, you referenced a 48% increase in funding for detention centers, and then when you went back years later, there was no change. Are there instances where funding is being allotted? How is that being used? What are you finding in these situations?
The matter I'm referring to specifically had to do with staffing in Indian detention centers. And as a result, I believe in part of our 2004 report, where staffing was one of the multiple concerns, Congress appropriated BIA a considerable amount of money. I think, if I said 48% increase, about $62 million or so. And what our effort was to go see how they spent that money. And unfortunately, we could not determine how they accounted for it, but very little, if any, was done to improve staffing.
The frustration that's experienced here is that there are so many different variant issues that we're dealing with. There's just a multitude of both legal, with land issues, with relationship issues with cities and with state and with the federal government that were making job creation incredibly complex. And the greatest need that I see on the outside of this, and that's what I'm asking you coming in, is not necessarily additional dollars. It is the capacity for jobs to grow up on their own and to be, as you mentioned before, Chairman Allen, self-sustaining and not be dependent, but to be a fully functioning national economy within the system that's functioning there on the tribe. To where tribes that, as you mentioned before, the 230-some-odd tribes that run casinos, great if they're running a functioning business, whether that be a wind farm to try to figure out the process of how to get that up so it can be sold and so the jobs can exist there, or whether that be a functioning business that's high-tech, low-tech, manufacturing, whatever it may be. We've got to figure out the systems and the processes that need to get in place so that this can thrive on its own. Let me just ask you, Ms. Duville, the type of jobs that exist among the tribe and on tribal lands. You mentioned the wind farm is great. You mentioned the casino that you have. What are other jobs and industries or businesses that are there on site?
Well, right now, we have a lot of convenience stores, grocery stores, schools. Let me see, our tribal government, of course, and we employ about 500 to 600 people on the reservation.
Through the tribal government?
Through the tribal government. We also have the Bureau of Indian Affairs, our agency there. I'm not sure how much they employ or how many of the employees are Native American.
Okay. How many members on the tribe that live locally?
That live locally, approximately 30,000.
Okay.
For our tribe. But one thing that is highly pronounced on our reservation is that our unemployment rate is above 85%.
Wow.
So, you know, a majority of our people are unemployed. A lot of them are trying to be self-employed with the arts and crafts and, you know, the resources that we do have and the talents that they do have, to try to get some type of business off the ground, yet still it's hard.
Sure. Director Meadsalt, obviously we're scratching the surface. This is an initial hearing, and that's what this is fact-finding and hearing, and to initiate the process, then to disperse this to other committees that are engaged with it directly on it. You have identified multiple areas, both written and orally, on it. If there's one area to look at and say, this one's got to be resolved first, could you identify one to say, this is the key that's got to be resolved first from the federal government side to make sure that we're pulling back any impediment to job growth in any of these tribal areas?
I'll go first. I think the land and trust issue has to be resolved.
Okay.
Because until the tribes have a secure land base, they cannot undertake the type of activities that the two tribal members have talked about. They cannot conduct grazing, they cannot conduct forestry, they cannot conduct business or gaming activities. They need to have a secure land base. And until this uncertainty that the Carcieri decision has created is resolved, what we're concerned about is that more and more tribes are going to come to Congress looking for legislative solutions to this problem rather than going through the BIA application process.
How do you see that being resolved? Is there something that you look at and say, this is going to have to be resolved here?
I think there could be legislative solutions. There could There could be court decisions that help resolve it, but there are lots of different ways it can be resolved. It's a definitional issue. We need to know what exactly does it mean by federal jurisdiction in 1934. So that could be resolved either in the courts or by Congress.
Well, the courts are down the street, so we'll have to resolve it with the legislative solutions here. So I appreciate your testimony.
would
I'm out of
work.
time. And other folks that are here, and be very pleased to be able to receive. If you have additional comments and thoughts that you may have that you want to be able to submit to Congress for us to disperse to the other areas, you may have 7 days to be able to get those things back to us. So as things come up, we'll be very pleased to be able to contact you with follow-up questions as they come up from there. I'm very grateful for your time, and I apologize that we had a vote right in the middle of it and much delayed the process we were going with. Unless there are additional thoughts and comments on it, this hearing is adjourned.